Story 1. I wasn't allowed to be out of the house once I got home from school, except for good reason outside of my room. That lasted from the age of 15 until 17, when I moved out. During an argument, my father hit me, and I hit him back as hard as I could. They were not happy. Story 2. I had a gun pulled on me because I was crying in the bathroom for too long, upset from being yelled at. Story 3. Including 2 examples to illustrate the difference. From my mom. I had to pull weeds at 50 cents per hour to pay for the laundry room shelf I broke. From her second husband. I was grounded in my room for 3 weeks. I was only allowed out for meals, school, and 2 bathroom breaks a day, with a maximum of 15 minutes each. While out of my room, I was not allowed to look up from my plate or the carpet. There were no phone calls or conversations unless I was asked a direct question. In my room, my radio, television, and all non-school related books were removed. I was not allowed to look out the window, sing, draw, or write anything that was not related to assignments. Basically, when I wasn't doing homework, I was expected to sit still and stare blankly at the wall until bedtime, as I was also not allowed to sleep before 10 p.m. What did I do wrong? I didn't hear him yelling at me to bring him a glass of milk while he was sitting 10 steps from the fridge. Story 4. I was hit with a belt because I got a tiny scratch on my dad's truck. I was tired after being woken up early for day camp. The worst part wasn't the hitting. It was when he picked me up and told me he would do it when we got home. The way he said, "Just wait," made it seem like he was looking forward to it. Story 5. We had a large woodpile and my brother and I got in trouble once. I don't remember the reason. My dad made us move the woodpile across the backyard. When we finished, he said he didn't like it there and made us move it back to its original spot. Took us days. Story 6. Reading these comments makes me realize again that I had a very good, peaceful childhood. And I am very sorry that so many of you were treated this way. It is completely unacceptable. Story 7. I had a piece of bread forcefully shoved into my mouth for putting it in the fridge on a plate instead of back into the bread bag. Story 8. I was physically punished for not performing well in math because others thought I was lazy. Later, as an adult, I learned that I have dyscalculia, which is why I struggled so much. Story 9. I had trouble with my math homework, so my dad became upset and chased me into the bathroom where I locked myself in. I don't remember my exact age, but I was still in elementary school. Story 10. I was frequently criticized for taking a tone with my parents. I am still not completely sure what they meant by that, but I definitely plan to apply the same discipline to them when they treat me that way. Story 11. I experienced a lot of hardship growing up. My mother once used a thin tree stick to punish me, causing injury. She said she felt bad afterward, but that didn't matter to me. My parents should never have had children. Story 12. I didn't want to play the piano but was pressured into playing it for years. After weeks of yelling at me, my mom wrote a note telling me she was going to stop raising me. I had one, and it was time to raise myself. She signed it, "Love, a failed mother." She sat in the living room with her head in her hands until I read it. I was around 9. I call that my worst punishment because it was premeditated. The worst reaction and treatment I experienced were different. The worst reaction might have been when my mom would scream, cry, and hit herself in the face as hard as she could, shouting that she wished she could hit me this badly, all over the piano. Story 13. I won't say it was the worst punishment I ever received, but it was definitely the most unfair. When I was little, my younger female cousin and I would bathe together, while my brother and older male cousin would bathe together. One day, my female cousin and I decided to play a prank on our brothers by slightly opening the bathroom door, reaching in to turn the light off, and then running away giggling. Well, my aunt caught us and assumed we were peeking in at the boys to see them naked. I was taken to my mom, who demanded to know if we were trying to see the boys naked. I said no, and began to explain, but my mom yanked me into the other bathroom and washed my mouth with soap, repeatedly asking if I was trying to see the boys naked. Each time I attempted to explain, she washed my mouth out with soap until I was forced to say yes, just to make it stop. She wasn't interested in the truth. She just wanted me to admit guilt. Story 14, my life. My father wanted a divorce. My mother wanted a strong boy to look after the farm. She promised my father that if he stayed, that is what he would get. Instead, they had a sickly little girl. I do not have a single nice thing to say about my childhood or the lack thereof. Story 15. Not me, but a very close girlfriend of mine from our church years ago, around 2006 when I was 16 and she was 15. My friend had her period during the night, and it got on her sheets. She told me her dad freaked out. He was that type of Christian who lacked education and held misogynistic views, even leading our youth group. In response to this, he removed her door because he was convinced she was engaging in sinful acts in her room. The happy update is that she left for college in 2009 and never returned home. She lives across the country, has a great job, got married, and is happy and child-free. Story 16. Wooden spoon with a hole in it. It would be amusing to get welts on my skin with a hole in the middle not being red. Story 17. Out of school for fighting led to chopping wood every day I was suspended, including the weekend after. It was pretty tame compared to what I have read so far. Story 18. I attempted to end my life. I was handcuffed in the middle of the night and taken to West Virginia, where I experienced beatings, mental abuse, and was broken down for 9 months. Story 19. There is a lot I could add, but one memory that still haunts me is when I was grabbed by the neck and slammed down onto the table. I was in middle school, crying because I didn't understand my math homework. My dad thought I had yelled at my mother. Story 20. My mom permanently canceled Christmas when I was 15. I don't really know what I did wrong other than not becoming the perfect daughter on track for Harvard like she wanted. I received excellent grades in my high honors classes and followed strict rules, but I guess that wasn't enough. The kicker, if I hadn't been emotionally and physically abused throughout my teenage years, I probably would have had the mental health and motivation to at least apply to Harvard. Instead, I developed complex post-traumatic stress disorder and ended up a homeless runaway. Story 21. I had to hold $1 against the wall with my nose for an hour. That was my punishment for not wanting to help my mom change diapers. I was around 10 or 11 years old. I got spanked and grounded frequently, but nothing compares to the shame I felt holding the dollar to the wall while my family moved around me as if everything was completely normal. Another time, my mom had my sibling and me wash her car inside and out during the rain in Florida, just hours before a hurricane was set to hit, because we spilled some of our drink on the car carpet. Story 22. They sent me to an ultra-conservative Bible college when I was 17, without any guidance on how to navigate this significant theological shift. I spent that year and many years afterward believing we were all going to hell. Story 23. My mom used to shut off the electricity in my room and the hot water when I was punished. I wasn't allowed to eat either, which usually lasted for a day or two. I had to eat outside the house. She would also pull me down to the floor and occasionally hit or choke me. Story 24. I wasn't allowed to sleep, eat regular meals at home, express emotions, participate in sports based on my feelings, or have a girlfriend who wasn't seen as unstable. I could not have a social life or take credit for my athletic performances. All of this was due to my adoption. One day, I had enough of my life being threatened. I was ready for death if only I could fight back. I told her to kill me and she wouldn't. I later discovered that my abusive aunt took money from my biological mother to have me mistreated because she didn't want me. I felt trapped and couldn't leave this situation behind while in boot camp. Story 25. I hurt my nose on the staircase after my father chased me and kicked me while I was trying to escape. This was all because my primary school headmaster, who in hindsight was quite difficult, reprimanded me for not paying attention during the school assembly. Story 26. My mother used to punish me with a belt, but that was in the 1970s. One time, I vomited on her yellow shag carpet, and another time, I cut a lamp cord with her hair-cutting scissors. Finally, at 9 years old, I hit her back, and she never hit me again. Story 27. I got caught one New Year's Eve going to a party after telling my friends I was sleeping at my best friend's place. They called to say Happy New Year, and my best friend's mom told them she thought they knew we went to the party. My parents came to the party and got me. I knew I was in trouble. I was grounded until Easter. Then they tried to extend it, claiming my grades weren't good enough. After 4 months of being restricted to home, only leaving for school and work without television, phone, or music, I told them I would go live with my dad if they extended my punishment. They decided not to extend it. Story 28. I am not sure which was worse. My dad choked me for walking home alone from school. My mom threw a block of wood at my face for talking back. My dad knocked a tooth out for jumping on the bed. Story 29. I was not allowed to watch television or read books for entertainment due to my school grades. I was alone every evening from 4th grade through high school because my parents and brother would go to the television room right after dinner each night. I now realize I had severe attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and I could not improve my grades because textbooks and homework required more concentration than I could ever muster. Story 30. Not counting any instances of sporadic violence from my father, which happened occasionally, I was grounded indefinitely, all my books were confiscated and put in the attic, and I was threatened with the withdrawal of my place at a new school, meaning I would have to attend a special school, for having a colossal public meltdown in several places over about an hour when I was a small child. I was part of a St. John Ambulance Badger group, and the group leader's oldest daughter was bullying me, which also meant the group leader herself held a grudge against me, and I lost control. My father pulled up the car to see me being physically restrained by multiple people, and that was the turning point. I remember his first words as I was bundled into the car. "We bend over backwards for you, and this is how you behave." In practice, I was grounded for a couple of weeks before my father relented. But that was definitely the worst experience. If you've seen any fake videos online where a father runs over someone's video game console with a lawnmower while the child wails, or takes a hammer to someone's gaming unit, that was my reaction. Except I didn't have a gaming unit. I had a few hundred books. I also got expelled from the group, but that goes without saying. Story 31. My biological mother stripped me naked and forced me to watch myself get beaten in front of a mirror. The reason was that I traded a pen for my friend's cool pencil, and we were going to trade back in 3 days. My mother flipped my backpack upside down to check if I had stolen something and noticed the pencil since she didn't recognize it. She thought that meant I had taken it. The punishment was meant to be humiliating. I had already begun developing breasts, which was why she stripped me naked and forced me to look at my own body. She knew how puberty made young girls uncomfortable and wanted to hurt me with it. The beating while watching myself naked was part of it. She wanted to shame me for being born female. In her words, "If you're stealing pencils now, you're going to grow up to be the person who steals married women's husbands." The second worst thing was when she told me my autoimmune disease was my own fault. The third worst thing was when she said I should be glad my biological father didn't treat me poorly. The fourth worst thing was tearing apart my art project that I had spent 2 weeks working on after I finished it the night before it was due. Then she made me lie to my teachers about it, saying it was my fault she destroyed it because I put it in between scrap newspaper and I knew that would get torn up. This same lie was used twice subsequently for other homework assignments that would be ruined by her. I could go on, but then we would be here all day. Story 32. Some of these experiences are truly unfortunate, and I feel for those who had to go through them. I don't remember many things I did wrong because I was mostly a good kid. However, I do recall pulling a fire alarm at school to avoid a test I had not studied for. As a result, I received a week's detention and was grounded for 3 weeks. I love drawing, so my mother took away all my sketchbooks and paper and made me do my homework in her presence to keep me focused. I believe I was around 12 years old at the time, still in middle school. During those weekends, I was sent to my grandparents' house, where I was assigned chores and tasks. It was the worst 3 weeks of my life, but I learned that my actions have consequences, and I never skipped studying for a test again. Story 33. My worst experience was being kicked out at 17, mainly due to emotional abuse. Some of the stories here are truly horrible. Story 34. Always silent treatment. No one in the house would talk to me for days, weeks, and once it lasted for 8 months. I escaped that, and now I am happy in a different country. Story 35. Mine was quite difficult. But I wasn't doing well when I was 14 or 15 and was not completing my classwork for any of my subjects. I was very depressed. My teacher informed my mother, and she became very upset and took my phone away. I would sit in my room and complete my assignments. I would come home from school, eat, and work until dinner, allowing myself a few breaks in between. One time, after completing all my work for one subject, I thought it would be okay to watch television while I ate before returning to my assignments. My mother came home while I was still eating and was angry at me for watching TV, yelling at me quite a bit. I doubt I will ever forgive my teacher because I was a good student in her class, and she was generally nice. However, I can't forgive the fact that she didn't understand that I was going through a tough time. I struggled a lot with eating and often felt as if I were dying. I'm not sure if I can forgive my mother either, but I do love her. She has done many things wrong, but she has also accomplished a lot of amazing things. Our relationship is tumultuous, to say the least. It often felt like I was being punished for not being okay rather than for not doing my work, as my mother somewhat knew I was struggling but chose to ignore my problems anyway. Story 36. I was grounded for 2 months because I skipped one class. My sister, who was often absent from school, faced no consequences. Story 37. There were a few things that people might consider worse, but to me, the worst was having your door taken away. The reasons for this varied. It started with a strict, always open policy. The only time we were allowed to close our bedroom door entirely was when we were changing. Otherwise, it had to be at least halfway open. The punishment for violating this rule was having the door taken away for a week. The same punishment was applied for various offenses if my mother, who enforced this rule, couldn't think of anything else. This included being 3 minutes late coming home from school. She would enforce it for being 3 minutes late, or being caught smoking, among other things. Story 38. They usually sent us to our rooms, but we would just sit there and play with toys, so they changed it. We had to sit on their bed in their room and not move for 30 minutes. That was difficult. Just sitting there with no toys, no TV, and no fun. I really hated that punishment. Story 39. My dad took the lock off my door when I was a preteen to stop me from slamming it. Looking back, I realize how foolish that was because I continued to slam my door. Story 40. I was punished with a cherry tree branch for being away from home for an entire day without informing my parents. I was 5 years old, and they panicked and called the police when I still wasn't home by 10 p.m. Story 41. I lost a key from our house for the 4th time. My father dragged me out into the winter night and locked me outside, only wearing pajamas with the words, "Don't come back until you find them." Story 42. My mom took Saints Row 2 away from me for a year because she heard the bad language in the main menu music. It was my favorite game at the time. Story 43. I used to kneel on uncooked rice, walk up and down stairs, and sit down and stand up for hours. Then, I had to hold a huge bowl of ice and water above my head until I couldn't anymore. The rest of the day, I had to move backward using the opposite hand and foot. A random spot would then be chosen for me to sleep. The following day, I would be quizzed on what type of soda was on the counter, whether the front door was open or closed, and what the letter magnets on the fridge said. I don't remember doing anything a child would get punished for. I was always pretty well behaved, polite, and respectful. Story 44. Severely reprimanded by my mother for answering the telephone immediately after it rang to say we weren't home when we were. I had been strictly instructed not to answer the phone if it rang because she was doing laundry. I was 5 years old. She was not pleased. Story 45. My mom had a rule when we were young. If you said a swear word, you had to have your mouth washed out with soap. The problem was, she would give you the choice between liquid hand soap or the Dove bar from the shower. I can safely say that if you are ever given that choice, pick the Dove bar. Liquid soap is incredibly bitter. My dad did not tolerate misbehavior in a restaurant. If you misbehaved, he would carry you out, put you in the car, lock the door, and go back into the restaurant to finish his meal. The late 1990s and early 2000s were a strange time. Story 46. The most impactful experience was having all my toys taken away as a child. The worst experience was getting beaten with a belt. Story 47. I got caught using hacked long-distance calling codes when I was 13 and had to pay $800, which I didn't have, so my mom had to pay. I lost my television, phone, and computer privileges for a year. The interesting thing is that after the year was over, I was playing around with a lineman's handset I had taken from a phone company truck and discovered that my phone, which my mom had disconnected, still had a dial tone. It turned out that the phone company had reassigned my old phone number to what turned out to be a fax machine in my area. They never turned off the voltage to my line, so I was essentially an unknown extension. I could direct dial anywhere in the world I wanted. That worked for almost a year. Story 48. I had to choose between getting hit with a block of firewood for stealing $5 to buy chocolate when I was a kid or being forced to eat tuna mornay, which I hate, and then vomiting it back again. I fought my sister for the toilet over that one. Story 49. Every time I forgot my keys, my father made me stand in front of the door for about half an hour until he let me in. I made many mistakes in my homework and had to redo it multiple times. Story 50. The worst punishment I remember was having my favorite video game taken away for a month. It was for consistently not doing my chores. While I was upset at the time, looking back, I believe it taught me the importance of responsibility and following through on my commitments. Story 51. I used to get punished with my father's belt. I grew up disliking him, and to this day, I still have strong feelings for him, even though he's been gone for almost 20 years. Story 52. Someone, probably a babysitter, injured me when I was 3 or 4. My mom gave me a black eye with a shoe when I was 6. She left bloody welts on my thighs whenever she lashed me with an electrical extension cord from ages 7 to 10. She dug her nails into my cheek, leaving me with a permanent scar when I was 11. I guess all those times I misbehaved or talked back contributed to this. As hard as I try, I can't pick the worst moment. They all felt awful. Story 53. I got grounded for a month because I went with my friend to the cinema for his birthday, and my brother wasn't invited. I told my mom about when my brother and his friend got to ride a fire truck for his friend's birthday, and I wasn't invited. She knew it was a double standard, but I still had to serve the entire month. Story 54. I was beaten and left with bruises, making it difficult to sit for a week because my teacher assigned a 0 as a placeholder grade for an assignment. Though not really a punishment, the worst thing they did to me was drive away my first girlfriend by making racist comments about her. She was the first person who truly loved me, and I struggled with suicidal thoughts for a few years afterward. Story 55. In 3rd grade, about 30 years ago, we were doing cursive lessons and had homework. I was working on it when my dad didn't like how I was forming my cursive Fs. He kept shouting at me to redo them, getting angrier as I became more anxious and sloppy in my writing. Eventually, he grabbed an adjustable wrench and struck me on the head with it. It split my scalp, and blood poured down my face. I don't recall much of what happened afterward, but I think he helped clean me up and had me put a bag of frozen peas on the injury. The next day, either during recess or before school, my memory isn't clear. I had a headache and accidentally hit my forehead on something, causing more blood to flow down my face. I remember my vision turning red from the blood in my eyes. 2 friends of mine, Patrick and Tyrone, saw what happened and walked me to the nurse. I recall that she asked me what occurred, and my first instinct was to lie, telling her that I had hit my head while feeding my dog the night before. I could tell she didn't believe me, but I assumed she thought that if I came in looking injured and was willing to lie, I must have had a good reason. I knew that if I told her the truth and the authorities got involved, it would be worse for me. To this day, I still have a flat spot you can feel where the scar is on my scalp. I confronted my dad about this when I was going through a difficult time in my life in 2018. He told me it had never happened. Not only did he insist it never occurred, but he claimed that if I genuinely believed it did, I should be institutionalized and heavily medicated because I was clearly delusional. When I pointed out that I still have a scar on my scalp, he suggested that maybe my abusive ex hit me, but he has never, in my entire life, put his hands on me. This is amusing because I have childhood friends who openly admit to witnessing him knock the coins out of my pocket on multiple occasions. Story 56. My last report card of the year was bad, so I was put on punishment for the whole summer. I wasn't allowed to go outside or really leave my room because my mom didn't want me watching TV. I couldn't visit anyone else's house either, as they might show me some television. I just sat in my room, staring at the wall all day. To keep myself entertained, I started making up stories about my favorite video games. This was before the internet was common, so I had no idea that what I was doing was fan fiction. Story 57. My mother hit me hard on my ear, resulting in cauliflower ear and loss of hearing for months. A 16-year-old girl came home with a hickey. Story 58. My dad used to spank me on my thighs. He would make us go without food or give us a piece of bread for dinner. One time, he made my brother and me clean the entire kitchen, including behind the fridge and stove, under the stovetop, and in all the cupboards with our toothbrushes. If we looked at or talked to each other, we had to do wall sits and push-ups. One time, he threw all our belongings, even gifts and things we paid for ourselves, into trash bags to take away and donate. We could only keep our clothes and bedding. He would ground us for months, meaning we could not leave our bedrooms unless going to school or doing chores. We could not talk to each other or play with the things in our rooms. We could only sit on our beds. I remember constantly being grounded. Story 59. I got grounded after running from the police while playing camping with a sibling and friends. We were trying to light a campfire using branches, a graham cracker box, and pine needles with a lighter borrowed from our mom under a giant old pine tree in a churchyard. To make matters worse, the police officer was our neighbor from down the street. It did not end well. Story 60. My dad taught me the alphabet and punished me every time I got it wrong. I was often left bruised. He apologized afterward and asked me not to tell anyone. Some things you just don't forget. When I reached my teenage years, I told him to leave me alone and walked away. Story 61. I was at the club when I was newly 18. My friends took me home because they couldn't unlock my phone to message my boyfriend. My mother took embarrassing pictures of me in that state, including close-ups of a tattoo she didn't realize I had gotten 2 years prior, so she could shame me for it the next day. About 2 years later, I found out from my sister, who heard from my father, that night she had kicked and punched me because she was so angry that I would do something so inappropriate as going out to the club. Mind you, she was okay with me having a 30-year-old boyfriend at the time, so I shudder to think that she believed going out was the worst thing I was doing. Story 62. I caught my mother's boyfriend chatting with one of my friends. He was around 40, and my friend and I were 17. I told her about it, and she smacked me across the face, which was especially painful since I had braces. Then, she took my bedroom door off the hinges, telling me that if I was going to invade her private life, she would take away mine. A month later, she caught him trying to deceive another girl my age. She apologized and returned my door, but it ruined our relationship, and I still don't talk to her today. Story 63. I was 12, maybe 13. I had been anxiously waiting for a concert my best friend and I were going to, chaperoned by her mom. We had been waiting for several months. My little brother did something. I don't even remember what it was. I called him a brat. For that, I was not able to attend the long-awaited concert with my best friend. He was being a brat. It didn't matter. Man, that hurt. Story 64. I was about 13 years old and had a paper route that paid only $7, which wasn't worth the effort. I decided to be clever and dumped the papers in a local bin. Unfortunately, someone saw me and reported it. The woman must have called my house and talked to my parents. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere except school and home for 2 months. Looking back, they were probably trying to instill a good work ethic in me, but it still felt like slave labor. Story 65. Reading these comments makes me realize that my parents, though not perfect, are not monsters or terrible individuals. It seems many of you have experienced difficult childhoods, and you deserve support and understanding. Story 66. My existence is the result of a rebellious 17-year-old girl getting pregnant by a guy 12 years older than she. She spent my entire life punishing me for being her mistake. Story 67. My most painful experience was when my mother struck me around the back of my knees with a willow branch that was brought home for that purpose. It broke the skin and I bled. My grandmother provided first aid and comfort. Story 68. My parents hated me, so I was often abused. I was thrown out 2 weeks after high school graduation. There was no catalyst. I was just locked out. I rang the bell. My parents opened the front door, threw a garbage bag with some clothes in it, and told me to leave their property. In 2017, they invited me back to help me during my divorce. It was a setup, and they and my sister, who is a police officer, beat me up. I was in the hospital for about a month. When I was discharged, they threw me on the street. I later learned they helped my ex abduct our children to get them out of state, destroy my property, and leave me homeless. My kids were missing for 4 months, and I still faced parental alienation. I was homeless for about a year. It makes sense they care about my ex because we were together for a long time. However, a man started stalking me and took their number from my phone. They spoke ill of me to him. I know about it because he tried to physically attack me using their words against me. The reason for their anger is that they tried to give me weapons growing up, telling me to harm myself. They would have helped anyone hurt me just for sport. They were wealthy and owned real estate. There was no reason for me to be homeless other than the fact that they didn't care about me. They never have. Story 69. 12 whacks with the hearth brush, which is part of a brush and shovel set, were for lighting a fire in the garage loft that was attached to the house and subsequently lying about it. Story 70. When my mom threatened me with a fruit knife, I didn't move out of the way quickly enough to get past her, so she hit my instep with the knife. She would have stabbed me in the side if I had walked past her to escape. That was on a Friday evening, and when I went to the school nurse on Monday, she told me that the ligaments in my big toe were completely torn and that I needed to go to the hospital. My mom was called to the school, and she expressed her shame about the situation, threatening me with "let's die together," as she spun the steering wheel of her car repeatedly. Story 71. I often felt angry when my parents fought and tried to get them to stop yelling. I had to wash my own clothes. I had to cook my own dinner. I was banned from using the computer. I was banned from watching television. I was permanently grounded. My brother went through my bedroom, found my hidden diary, and teased me about it without any punishment from our parents. I was left behind on a family holiday and was dumped at my grandparents' house for a week. Now, I no longer have contact with my parents. Story 72. Growing up in a rural area, we had a school bus stop that featured a 3-sided shelter, providing kids some shelter while waiting for the bus in the rain. I was about 12 and had just broken up with my boyfriend. Because he was upset, he graffitied the bus stop with, "For a good growl out. Call, insert my home phone number." None of the kids knew whose number it was, so no one realized who it referred to, except me. I was absolutely furious, so after the other kids were picked up by their parents, I took out my pen and wrote a reply. It was something as simple as "you suck." The next day, my observant mother noticed what I had written and got very upset. Do you know what suck means? It means suck a dick. I thought I raised you better than that. On Saturday morning, we drove back to the bus stop, and she sat in the car while I painted the bus shelter. You can imagine my poker face on Monday morning when all the kids were commenting about why their previously beige bus shelter was suddenly camouflage green. That was the only color my dad had in the shed. Story 73. I was 7 and scored 50-something on my first test. My mom scolded me for hours, shouting nonstop. My dad got fed up, took the cane, and gave me a beating. My mom did not stop the scolding, nor did she defend me. She continued with the shouting. The next morning, I had cane marks on my legs. My dad said, "Good. Let everyone see that." Story 74. My dad was a respected professional. I had younger siblings. He would sometimes line us up and take off his belt, then go at us one by one on our bare legs. I just remember my younger sister urinating in fear as she waited her turn. Story 75. Closing the door to my room and effectively trapping me inside. I now hate with all my being a room that looks like it can lock me in. Story 76. I had to skip Halloween because I drew on a door. Technically, I was allowed to go trick-or-treating when the door was clean, but I either drew hard or cleaned gently, so it never worked out that year. Story 77. I was grounded for 2 weeks at the age of 14 after getting drunk in my bedroom with the pastor's daughter, who smuggled the alcohol in. Story 78. It's between locking my jaw open, pouring liquid soap into my 6 to 7-year-old mouth, then slamming it shut without regard for the time she closed it when I was biting my tongue, adding extra tears to the situation, and making me wait for a minute or two before shoving me away to rinse it or spit it out myself. Alternatively, kneeling on uncooked rice on a hard floor, arms raised and back tucked in for over an hour for what I believe was the same reason. I don't remember what I did wrong, but I want to say it was for talking back. I remember crying so hard my chest spasmed, and I was carving my nails against the painted wall because my tears and breath made it too moist. It was easy to do at the same age. I didn't understand why it was so harsh. I never received detention during all those years I was in school. Story 79. I once had to pick up every little stick in the half-acre backyard during the summer without any water until I was finished. After that, I was punished by my ex-stepdad. Story 80. Partially due to my lack of friends, television was my only outlet. That was taken out of my room, and I quickly stayed on the straight and narrow until I did it again, up until I turned 18. Story 81. I've lost most of my phone privileges for doing nothing. My brother isn't responsible with his phone, while I am. Unfortunately, I had to learn responsibility the hard way because I had no limits when I first got my phone and ended up having to overcome an addiction to it. Because of my brother's irresponsibility, as well as some other issues with his behavior, my parents ended up putting limits on his phone. You can imagine he didn't like that. He started complaining that if he had limits, then I should have them too. At first, my parents said no to him, but he has since worn them down. I now have a phone that I bought and pay the bill for, with every possible limit they can put on it. They have directly told me that it's because he has limits on his phone. I turn 18 in a few months, so I'll be taking the limits off then, but it concerns me that they're willing to do something like that to keep my brother calm. He is very anti-LGBTQ, and guess who's bisexual? They've started trying to ask me to stop bringing up LGBTQ topics, but I'm making my best attempt to draw a clear line. Experience is the best teacher, and I'm not sacrificing my identity for peace. Peace can take a back seat if they're willing to do that just to have it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.